Hello, everybody. I am super excited to welcome one of my favorite guests, Jake Jorgovan, back to the show to talk about one of my favorite topics, hiring. So welcome, Jake. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me on here, Say.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get into the many questions that I would love to pick your brain on around how to really make your next hire successful, first I'm going to start by asking, as always, what would you say your superpower is?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is it really comes for me, it's a lot around creating and just like kind of coming up with new ideas and new things. And as that relates to the hiring, the topic of today, I find a lot of what I'm doing is finding great people and then like creating visions for like projects or things for them to go tackle. And so that's really like what I spend a lot of my time doing these days and what I really just enjoy, like visualizing a bigger future and then just trying to get people moving toward it.
Ooh, I really like that. And I also like the way you've broken it down. It's pretty cool how that's kind of evolved over the times. I guess I've interviewed you, I don't know, once every like 8 months or so for the last few years. And it's cool to see as kind of the different projects that you're working on have evolved and grown, how your kind of perception of yourself and your superpower and what you're doing in the world have grown and evolved as well. But to dig into that a little bit more, why does the world need this? Why does the world need what you do?
I think what I find is that there's so many talented people on my team. And like they're amazing at what they do, but like often like I find that like a lot of my leadership team, like they are entrepreneurs who just couldn't get it to work. And but they
Mm.
come and they work in like with me, and there is this just like incredible dynamic where it's like I'm able to like help identify like where they're strong and help paint a picture of something for them to move toward. And it's a really cool thing because like that's something you get the opportunity to do as an entrepreneur, is find that strength in people and then like help them have that vision. Because even like the two guys that are my partners at Lead Cookie now, they were trying to do this kind of outbound agency on their own, and they were doing okay. They had like 3 to 5 clients at any time, but they were just like overwhelmed by trying to run their own business. And when
Mm.
they just came in and joined, and it was like, hey, like I just like saw the strengths in them and like help guide them in the directions, and now they've helped build our business into something bigger. But there's just so many people out there where it's like they've got the talents and they just need someone to like point them in the right direction and like see their strengths and like give them something to move toward. And yeah, that's why I think it's just like a super powerful, fun skill to have.
Yeah, that's really cool. I relate to that super hard, not just because as my own kind of journey through the business world has grown, the thing that I personally love that draws me back again and again is actually like working with people and building teams that work with each other to create something really amazing instead of kind of working against each other. But also because I really deeply think that the world needs this. I cannot, I can't even come close to counting the number of people that are in my life in some form or another that have such amazing potential or capacity, or they have a skill or expertise that just isn't being properly utilized.
Mm-hmm.
Usually in their work environment. In my case, it's less entrepreneurs so much as people who are maybe like the people entrepreneurs are really looking for in a lot of senses. Like they don't want to go out, and it kind of sounds like maybe these are similar people who are doing really well, but the pressure of needing to be an entrepreneur and be self-directed and etc. is too much. But you also need a good leader. It's not enough to, I guess, be good at what you do and want to be able to do it well. It's a whole different set of skills to be an entrepreneur. So being a good leader is, yeah, that's really cool.
I love what you said there, because yeah, like what I mentioned, like one of the things that I think is with all the people that are now on my leadership team, like there's some people that they go out and they like hire like all-star A players right out of the gate, and that's like one route you can go. But what I think the route that I've done, and like where I feel like you're talking about, is you find these people that have this like unleveraged potential, and like they just
Mm.
haven't been able to be like put in the position, or they worked under like really terrible jobs, or they didn't really understand their own strengths, so they were trying to do something that was totally not a fit for them. And it's like even like my ops guy at Lead Cookie, like he was like working in this horrible job, he hated it, and he was like in like marketing, and like writing copy. And I was just like, no, like you're an ops guy. Like you're like the most like, he's like a bodybuilder, like counts every calorie. Like, and now he's running, like he went from like joining me just kind of like supporting to now he's, you know, we've got like 25 people on the team and he's like the COO. And it's so cool to see someone like evolve from that, of being in this like horrible job they hate, into growing them into a phenomenal thing. And that's like, I think one of the cool things you get to do as an entrepreneur is like grow and level people up like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, my COO is kind of a similar story in the sense that she actually applied for a basically a VA position. I hired her for about 5 minutes before I was like, holy shit, what are you doing? Like I need you, not temporarily, but like in a big way. And you are wasted in a VA role. And she was coming from a real estate background. And similarly, and I'll be honest, the only thing that gave me in her case, the courage to try and kind of hire her away from her other job, because it was supposed to just be temporary while she was on mat leave, was the fact that she hated it so much. She wasn't being used properly. Her superiors really didn't respect her. It was kind of a toxic environment a lot of the time. It's just incredible what you can do with these people with the aptitude who maybe just aren't being well used. Or utilized is maybe the better word. Used sounds icky. So I'm curious. I have obviously my own experiences, and I'm of course have all these questions prepped, and I'm throwing them out the window because I feel inspired. Where do you find these people, and how do you screen for these people, basically?
Yeah. So when looking to like hire for people, we have a pretty odd hiring process that we use at pretty much all my companies. Somewhere along the lines, I heard this idea of like the gauntlet as like this hiring process. And so basically, if you look at any of the job applications for Lead Cookie or Content Allies, you can kind of see this in works. But what you'll see is like our applications are like really intense. It's not like, hey, just send in your resume. It's like, hey, create a Google Doc, answer these questions. There's like 8 steps to it. And like one of them's like, send us a 30-second or less funny video. And like, then there's like another ones, and like, how would you handle these situations if these came up in work? Or like maybe like if it's a writing thing, like send us samples of your writing, you know. So we'll kind of adjust it to the job. But then in there, we also ask them, this is the one that like just gets most people, is we will say, hey, you need to do a 60-second or less, not a second longer, video or audio memo that you then upload to Dropbox. You can get a free account and make sure it's on Dropbox. And then you need to have Mozart playing in the background, Mozart's Fifth, and then start the first word is moist and the last word is toodaloo of your video. And then we put also, and then there it says like, put this at the very bottom of your Google Doc. And that's actually the detail that almost everybody misses. And it's this really like, basically the whole goal of this, like this super intense application process. So it weeds out tons of people. And we also, on that same page, we also include all of our company values, everything like that. And then we basically weed out a ton of people. And then like, you know, even when we're going through the applications, like the number of people that just miss some detail on that, it's just so easy. And like that, like it makes our applications where we're going from reviewing like, you know, 100 applications to being like, oh, we got 15 people who actually even like did this properly. Okay, now let's look at those. And so that makes it less work on us. And it also like what we find is it actually like attracts people, because like the people that get on the interview, they're like, I saw what you were doing and I get it. And like, that's why I went through, even though it was a lot more work than a standard application. I get what you guys are doing. And so that's kind of like the big kind of piece that we do from like the initial like recruitment stage to really just find those right people. And what's hilarious is you also get people that will email you and be like, I've literally had people just like F you, like, and like they're like messages to me like so pissed off. Oh my gosh.
I've also so been there. Like all of our bad reviews on Google are from people who hated our application process, but
it works though, because it weeds people out. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. So what I'm hearing from you is that it's not that there's some secret website that is like great aptitude are us or something like that. I'm hearing kind of 2 parts to this. One is creating an application process that goes beyond the traditional resume, which we're so preaching to the choir here, and basically has a series of different things that will allow people to show rather than tell you that they are observant, they give a crap, critical thinking, able to follow direction, etc.
Yep, exactly.
The other thing that I'm hearing here is that these people are lurking in the pools of talent that you would normally be hiring from. So it's not a matter of kind of finding this secret cache so much as it is putting what it is that you're looking for into the process itself, so that you are picking those kind of key people, whether it's, and I'm hearing that this is something that you probably do for all hires, not just say at the leadership level, so that you are greatly narrowing your pool so that you can make more educated decisions from who remains. Is that?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, I mean, and then there's like the pieces of like, once we get somebody in that's good, we'll interview them. Typically 1 or 2 people will interview them, and we then typically do like a trial, and I walk them through like a culture deck when we're onboarding to kind of let them know what we're about and culturally see if they're a fit. And, not everyone is a success, but those kind of things, when you weave all that together, I think, and you have, I think the second person generally approving hires is also another thing that helps, because I made some bad impulsive hires on my own. Most of the bad hires I made on my own. Versus when I had a second team member checking in, they would often point out other things. So all of those things I think help kind of just improve the whole process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I know that's something I've been through. And these days I'm the second person in most of our hiring, as opposed to the first. Like, I'm the second person who's doing the check as opposed to the person kind of leading it. And part of the reason for that is that I find that if I click with someone, I sometimes get so excited that it's easy to kind of sweep under the rug things that might be red flags.
Yep.
And what I'm hearing from you, which has been our experience as well, is that it's important to build things into the process, including having another person as part of it, that make some of that screening a little bit more objective. The person who doesn't include the thing at the bottom of the Google Doc after making the funny video in the right way isn't going to be considered, whether or not there's something there that might make you want to overlook all that stuff, because all that stuff's important, and it's important. Is that kind of what
the few times we broke those rules, like, those were bad hires. Like, it's just like, and I was like, times where I was like, it was always, and the other things that like the times we also broke the rules was always when, I think the other key to this is hiring very early. Because whenever you're in a rush to hire, that's also when almost all of the mistakes have come, versus whenever we're just like recruiting months in advance of needing to hire someone, and then like we've got a large pool, like you almost always succeed in a hire situation like that. But almost all the times where we're like, oh, they missed that detail, but like it's okay because like that never worked. Like, so.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm hearing this other kind of gold nugget here, which is to hire early as opposed to kind of when you desperately need that person. So how do you anticipate kind of when and who you're going to need to hire? Now, I hear from people, constantly be building a bench or building a pool. But I'd love to real talk that a little bit. Because I've had mixed success with that, because great people aren't always available when you need them. So what have you kind of learned through building these companies and building these like kind of robust, awesome teams at each one? How do you approach hiring months ahead? Is it anticipated growth? Is it just maybe we'll need that person? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it typically, there's a few pieces. One that I do, so like from like a growth perspective, is we will have kind of the, tiers of, like the growth of the company. So for like Content Allies is going through a growing phase right now. And so it's like, it's like, okay, so when we're at 20K a month, we do this. When we're at 25K a month, when we're at 30K, when we're at 40K, when we're at 50K, and you like, this kind of comes to the whole like E-Myth, like exercise, a built to sell exercise of like, what does your company look like when it's finished? Like build out that whole org chart, and then like you work back. And so like I literally have a spreadsheet with a financial model that just literally tiers out literally all the milestones of like cash along the way and like our monthly revenue and what hires we will bring in. And, we may not make it at exactly around that point, but that kind of lets us know of like, what are the phases? When are we looking for people and stuff like that? So that's one from a growth perspective. And I think the other one we also look at is, where do we not have redundancy? Where if someone left, like we would need to be like, we would be in a really tight position. And so, some of our like, higher roles like strategists or stuff like that, we're kind of like always looking, not like very intensely, but we're like, hey, maybe we won't need a strategist probably for another 6 months on our growth trajectory. But if for some reason like our strategist left, like that would be really tough and we need to be able to replace that. So we're always kind of recruiting for some of those roles like that. But those are kind of the two ways I look at it, and just like kind of what you anticipate you're going to need. And then also looking at the growth trajectory based off of like how you see the company growing over, your next phases.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to call attention to something that you said there, which is really knowing where your company, kind of what the end goal is, like what you want it to look like. You kind of started there, but I think that that's really undervalued in a lot of cases, where people kind of start this organization and then they're in consistent reactive mode. They're like, oh crap, need to like make more sales or something. Okay, now we're making more sales. Now we need more capacity, etc. And what I'm hearing from you is that while there's a certain amount of that happens because no plan is ever set in stone, it's important to understand kind of what you want your mature size and your mature company to look like and kind of what that structure should be. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. It's just such a great exercise. And it's something I didn't do in the earlier phases of my business, and was always just like, and then you're always kind of like thinking like, oh, do I need this or do I need that? And it's like, if you can just think about where you're going and then work backwards, you could adjust the plan, but it's just helpful. And it's like, okay, like there's no question. It's like, okay, when we hit, 50K a month, I know I'm going to be hiring like a marketing person to help. And it's just like very clear that like around that stage, like I'll start looking for a marketing person. And it's just like a lot of people, I feel like, especially earlier in my entrepreneurial days, I was just like all over the place. Like, what do I do? What do I need to do? I need this or do I need that? And it's like, just build the plan and then like work the plan. And so it's just, yeah, like having that, it's a super valuable exercise to just build that vision and like document it all out.
Yeah, what I'm hearing too is that similar to the hiring process, this removes some of the kind of reactive, like, oh yeah, exciting, let's do that kind of decisions where, you're making the decisions. This is how this is how I approach. If anyone who's listening to this is a "you need a budget" fan, this is also how I approach basically like money questions as well. Which is that when you have just a bank of money and you're having to make decisions to spend it, then you're making a judgment call every time, and all of the different things that affect your context are affecting that every time. And when you're in the weeds, it's hard to kind of see from the crow's nest. So what I'm hearing is that by making that plan and making those decisions in a specific way, when you're not kind of just responding to actions and events, means that you can hold those objective decisions and make basically informed shifts or nudges without having to be making up the plan as you go along and potentially getting yourself into a corner because you're making a key decision basically when you don't have as clear of a head as you might have.
Yeah, exactly. One of the biggest things I see like a ton of people do is like I think when like they're not doing this well is like they come across somebody and they're like, oh, this person's great. And like, they just want to like hire some great person. And it's like that rarely works unless they happen to be fitting into like what your organization needs right now. Because you can get a great person in, and I made that mistake myself. And like, it's like you get someone in and then you're like, you don't have stuff for them to do, and you're trying to come up with projects, and then like it's not a win for anybody. And like that's, so that's I think it's definitely an important part of it too, or it just helps you alleviate that, where it's like, hey, I know a rock star sales guy right now, but I don't got a job for him. So it's like, well, I find something else, but like it's, otherwise like, you'll be impulsed to like try to pull someone in like that.
Yeah, I definitely feel called out right now. No, but that's it, right? Like that's why it's important to be aware of these things and to set kind of the constraints in motion. It's not because there's a secret perfect leader out there, but because we all feel these tendencies and that it's important to constrain them as much as possible. Okay, so just to kind of shift our perspective a little bit. So For someone who maybe doesn't have all of these awesome processes in place and doesn't have this experience, what would you say is the number one mistake that you see your average kind of agency leader who's trying to grow their, maybe they already have a small team, but they're trying to grow it? What do you see kind of being that big misstep that could easily be avoided?
I think the biggest thing, like so much of the tactical stuff on hiring isn't that hard. Like we've shared a lot of that here. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest misstep I see is people being really poor at managing new hires whenever they start making those new hires
Okay.
and not giving clarity to like the people and then blaming and saying that it's a bad hire when really it's them like not giving clear enough direction, like how to succeed. Like one of the simplest things I learned from my advisor early on, but it's just like having a 90-day success plan for a new hire and just defining like what is success for you. Like how are you,
Mm.
what are the criteria? Like what are you going to be doing over these next 90 days? Like what do you need to learn? What do you need to be capable of? What are you going to be responsible for? And I think that's probably one of the biggest things where people just hire someone and then they're just like kind of throw them into the mix and expect them to figure it out. But if it's like, again, what we talked about at the beginning, it's like, if you don't give someone that target to go toward, if you don't say, hey, this is how you're going to succeed here, they'll just kind of flounder and like try to do stuff. And like, and then neither of you will be happy. And so I think the biggest mistake I see people make when they start making those hires is not knowing how to properly like manage or like set someone up for success.
Hmm. That's interesting. I think that definitely resonates for me because even as a very process-driven organization, like one thing we've learned is when we hire someone, almost have more work for them to do rather than like trying to like scale them up, like throw them in a little bit harder. But I'm curious. So, how much of this should be done before you even make that hire or start looking? Like, is this something you should have fully prepared, or is this something you kind of come up with concurrently, or what does that look like?
It typically, I mean, when writing out the job description or what the role is going to be, you kind of get some clarity into what this looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's typically, well, I would love to say I plan it all in advance. It's typically normally like once we've like made the hire and then we're onboarding them, unless it's a role that we've hired on before and we've already
Mm-hmm.
got this documented and like we're duplicating the role. But in most cases, it'll be okay. We're onboarding you. Okay, now like let's start doing. Well, I'll do one-on-ones and maybe even do a few longer and more intensive sessions if I'm really working closely with someone for like their first few weeks. But really, just like I normally will come with a agenda and like a success criteria. And they'll typically include like phases where like, hey, you're going to shadow and like watch what we do. You're going to study all this stuff and like read all the things we have documented. Eventually you'll do the work and we'll shadow you or I'll shadow you. And then like the third phase will be, okay, like you do the work and then I check in. And then eventually it's just kind of like, random kind of check-ins or reporting or stuff like that. But yeah, it's typically building that plan, which is honestly normally just a Google Doc that kind of just breaks down like an agenda of what our onboarding calls are going to be and what success looks like in 90 days. So it's nothing overly complicated. It's just like a bullet point list of things basically on what is success for you in 90 days.
So what I'm hearing is that while you're putting together the job description, uh, well, first of all, because as we already talked about, you shouldn't just be bringing people on without understanding what the role is
Mm-hmm.
about. You might have a general idea of kind of what those outcomes are, what those key responsibilities are, because you need to do that work to prepare to hire anyway. But that when it comes to kind of like itemized specific, what you're going to need to understand over the course of the next 90 days and what you need to know at the end of it, I'm hearing that it's okay if that's not perfectly together before you start hiring, as long as it's together enough to guide you through that process. And the two things I'm really hearing are the outcomes, like what do they need to be able to manage, achieve, et cetera, as well as kind of like what are the key topics that they need to cover to get there.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things where just like, okay, what are all the tools that we use? Like the tech tools for project management or all like, there's just all those little simple things and just getting that all documented and just having a plan for someone is just super helpful and helps them get up to speed way quicker versus them asking you like, how do I do this? Or where's this? Or where's that? It's just like, take the time to just sit down and like get it all out there. And then like, it just makes them happier, get up to speed way quicker and less, pinging you with random things that they don't have or need or anything like that. So just doing that time to prep for that session helps that new hire go like way, way quicker.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That also is in line with what I've discovered if I don't want to be the person or if I'm not appropriate to be the person doing the training, then working on that kind of document. And it's interesting because this wasn't kind of part of our training plan, but we've done a lot of hiring in the past few months. We've been in a growth phase, so to speak, all of it planned. But I've been discovering that these sorts of documents basically are coming up because they're so helpful to put together. And I find it really helps bridge the gap as a leader between what you are expecting kind of as someone who's not personally touching it, as opposed to someone who is maybe touching the job or training the job or, otherwise going to be more deeply connected to it. I find that sort of document kind of bridges the expectations between what I'm looking for kind of as the founder or the owner or whatever, and what maybe the people who are in leadership in my organization are thinking and wanting. Just not as, you can't read each other's brains. It's not always as the same as you think.
Totally helpful. I totally get that. Just, even if you're not involved, you can still set those expectations for someone else to manage. So love that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now as you're going through this process, going through the hiring process, going through the training and kind of management process, what are some red flags that maybe might help you note that someone isn't a good fit? Like maybe they made it through your gauntlet, so to speak, or they're on their way through the gauntlet and they're kind of checking all the boxes. What are some things that, do you account for all the red flags in the gauntlet, or what are some things that might kind of let someone know early on it's not a fit?
I think when there is complaints from other team members about a person, that's the sign definitely of like things, or if like someone just really isn't fitting in. I think one of the other things that actually just from a simple interviewing thing, but the question, like when you're actually on the phone with somebody is like, would you want to like hang out at a barbecue with this person? If you like imagine like a whole company like retreat, like would this person, like would they fit in there? And just from like a cultural perspective, and there's been somewhere some of the hires where it's like, this is an odd thing. And like this person just definitely doesn't feel like they're kind of fitting in here. And it seems like an odd thing, but like they're probably feeling the same thing that like the whole team's feeling in that kind of sense. So I'd say that is one. The other things is obviously just if like the work is just not up to par, and that's not to say the first time they get the work, if they don't nail it right the first time, like that can be okay. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, especially if it's your first time like hiring for this, then like that can be something that maybe like you just didn't properly give them or set expectations. But if you kind of go through multiple rounds with someone, or like the work's just consistently sloppy, or like it's just they're missing things even though like you corrected them or made it clear, like those are things we look for, is like missing details, and then like lack of cultural fit. Like details matter is one of our values. And so like when we see people just like missing like small stuff that it's clearly documented like that, those are kind of like red flags for us.
Okay. So a few things I'm hearing here are making sure that you're listening to other people on your team if they're speaking up, looking for things. And this is a big one for me, at least, because this is where we've messed up in the past, where someone has made mistakes or missed details. And we've kind of been like, oh, well, they're just getting started. That's just normal or something. But if you're hiring and screening for that thing, then no, it's not normal. And it's definitely something to pay attention to. That's what I'm hearing. And the values, just in terms of it being a culture fit, this isn't something we've specifically mentioned, but I've heard strongly throughout what you're saying. And I just want to make it clear for anyone who's listening, which is that when we talk about culture, most of the time that means, are they demonstrating the same values that you have chosen for your team, kind of the standards for behavior and connection, so to speak. So for someone else who maybe doesn't have the value that details matter, someone missing little details may or may not be a big thing, but the issue here is the alignment or the lack of alignment.
Yep.
Yeah. We've also, because although people say hire slow, fire fast, we have definitely found that in our team, we tend to give people kind of the benefit of the doubt and maybe like keep them longer than we should have. And something I just want to add that we found is, as we identify red flags for people, we write them down, and we actually set up, similar to what you're talking about being kind of a success sheet.
Mhm.
for training someone. This is just kind of like a leader cheat sheet, which is to say these behaviors aren't okay. This is the severity of how not okay that behavior is. And it's kind of nice to have something objective, I find, to kind of gauge against, especially if you have multiple people in a position of power who might have different opinions. That again, you've agreed upon when you're not in the moment, that you can then check against after, something has happened, where maybe you might be tempted to say, oh, we'll let this pass this time or give them another chance or something. You can kind of see, oh no, this didn't work out last time. Let's not do that.
Yeah, I love that. That's an awesome approach. So I like that. I may have to take that idea. That's a smart one to just kind of actually document them as they happen. So I like it.
Awesome. I'm glad you have provided so much value for us over the years. Happy to shoot something back in terms of a cool idea. Yeah, just to, oh man, I like so many topics. I could just keep going on and on about this forever. And I still have about a million questions. But I do want to start to wrap us up here and just be respectful of time. So I want to kind of ask the flip side, like, what are the green flags that you found if you notice someone doing this? It's like, wow, we know this just really confirms that it's a good fit.
Yeah, I think whenever you see someone just going like above and beyond in like what they're doing, and maybe delivering more when someone like identifies a hole in the process or like sees a way to make it better. Like those tend to be really great things. People who kind of speak up at meetings and our team meetings and stuff like that, and kind of, I guess, show initiative or show interest, or they take feedback really well is another thing. Sometimes, you can have people that just like really struggle with feedback, and like, they're difficult there. And so just working well with others, I think, is things. And then just also like the quality of their work. Like, sometimes it just comes down to like, wow, this person like is great at what they do, and like they're passionate about their craft. And like we've got a designer on our team at Content Allies, and she is just like awesome, and like she just loves design, and like we just have endless projects for her, and she is just happy. And it was just, but like I went through so many designers where it was just like, you get back this design and it's just like, this is just like some bland, boring thing that looks like everything else. And then like our current designer like takes every small project and it's just like makes it something that she's just like, that's just like, wow, this is like high end stuff here. And like, so it's finding people that are passionate. Some of the other odd things that someone said to me once, but like when someone is obsessed with something, even if it's outside of work, when people are like really like nerdily, weirdly obsessed with stuff, that tends to be like really good, like in odd ways. But like we've got a guy on our team who's like really into like manga and like Transformers and like stuff like that. And like other guys, people that are into like biking and fitness. But whenever someone has some obsession, that tends to just like be some good sign for some reason that they're going to be like a great person to work with. And like, if they put all their heart into like something, even if it's a hobby, they're going to put that into work as well. So those are just a bunch of random green lights that came to mind, but those are all things that look well for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Overall, I think this has just been an episode that's so full of gold. If someone's looking to hire, it's kind of nice to end on those like positive, exciting notes in terms of advice. But to kind of shift the conversation a little bit to you personally, what would you say gets you up every morning?
Yeah, I love just like getting started. And honestly, like just, I spend, before I go into any work or stuff, I spend several hours, probably about an hour and a half on like personal development and reading and learning. I spend like 2 hours working out. And then I have recently like gotten back into my habit of spending an hour or two on music all before I like dive into work. And like, that gets me excited to like do all this stuff on myself before actually working. Like I'm actually not that excited to like get into the work. But like I'm excited to do all this other stuff before the work begins. Like that's actually like what gets me going this morning. I remember I hopped out of bed because I had an earlier call today and was like, no, I want to get in my music time. So that's a lot of what gets me going in the morning, is just that fun time on myself. So
Excellent. I love that. Yeah, I wish I could embrace some of that, because I know the mornings where I give myself the time to say like, just hang out and like do a good yoga session or something and like do movement. those days are great, even if I'm not necessarily into the day when I'm getting up. So, all right. And I think this is a related question, but what would you say the number one thing that you do right now to preserve your wellness is?
I've got a intensive morning routine that I've followed for years. I don't know. I can maybe give like a quick overview. There's like
Sure,
multiple steps to it, but yeah. So I wake up and in the mornings I basically will journal. And then I will, I'm going to pull this up. I will journal and then I will basically, I've got a handful of things of like a daily stoic. I also do some affirmations every day. I then do like a guided journaling that's kind of meant to help you kind of look at situations from different angles that I do every day. I then meditate. I also write a love note to my wife, as well as a message to just somebody in my family or my friends. So just like constantly like touching base with someone every day. I eat a ton of vegetables for breakfast every morning, and then I work out and I meditate. So like that's basically my full morning routine, which takes like 3 hours, but I do that almost every single day, and it just gets me powered up, feeling good for the day, and keeps me all in all in a wonderful headspace. So yeah, that's my morning routine. So it's all of those combined. I don't know that I can like cite like a single one of them that like does it all, but those all just I constantly am like tweaking that to like whatever serves me the best. So
Awesome. It sounds like the consistency of the ritual is, where perhaps some of the power is, and the individual elements might shift and change, but the consistency of kind of taking that time for yourself sounds like a really powerful action.
yeah, I would definitely say so. And that's, even if people are like, don't have any morning routine and they hear what I said and they're like, that's like, how the hell would I ever do that? It's like, okay, then like, I can also do that consolidated down into an hour if I wanted to and like do it really basic, but it's like having some sort of routine there that gets you going. And even if it's just one element of that and just some consistent piece in the morning, I feel like is just so powerful.
I love that. And I love the lack of, uh, I don't know if compromise is the right word. I know that for myself, I often struggle with maybe like guilt or shame taking that much time for myself in the morning. Yeah, I really admire that, whether it's short or long or whatever, that's what works for you and you do it. I think that's great.
Yeah, I'll share one other thing on that, but it's just like I actually just got back I took a week vacation for my companies, which was like this really wonderful thing. And it was interesting to come back. And I realized like after I took the vacation, like how fatigued I was before leaving and how I was like starting to make poor decisions, or like getting kind of frantic or like almost like going and like making like very big wrong strategic choices and stuff. And it's just really interesting if you don't give yourself that time to prioritize yourself and to give yourself time, then like you'll end up just making like worse decisions. And it's just really interesting where like if you look at like the wealthiest people like Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, these people, like they just sit around and like read and focus on themselves all day and then make like a few really big decisions, like and that's the thing. It's like, how do you get yourself in the right headspace to make the right decisions? And it doesn't always have to be hustle all the time.
Oh, yes. In fact, I would say that what I'm hearing from you here, which I also agree with, is that hustle all the time can be dangerous because you didn't just say, oh, yeah, I took a week's vacation because I was noting I was making worse decisions and stuff. You said, after I got back from that week's vacation, I noticed just how tired and fatigued I was in making those decisions and stuff. And obviously, you had to have been somewhat aware of it to make that call to take a week off. But just what I'm hearing from you here is that it's easier to see it from the other side, and that it's important to set aside that time before you're at that critical step. So that you can preserve. It sounds almost like it's a gift that you give to yourself and to your companies, is to be able to do what you need to do to be in the mental space to make the key strategic decisions that will lead it in the best future direction that no one else can make.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's times where like my team will notice if I'm like my headspace is kind of off. Like when COVID hit, like my headspace got off, as I think it did for a lot of people. But one of the biggest things I think for people that are still like a resistance or afraid of this or anything like this, even if you take like a day for yourself or you start taking mornings for yourself, but one of my advisors once asked me the question. I was like really close to like, I was just like really burnt out and stuff. And he's just like, so what would happen if you just took Friday off? And I was just like, I guess like not a lot. And it's like, whenever you realize that, like, oh, if you just like work a little less, like nothing's probably going to be that bad. Maybe you grow a little slower, but that probably actually won't be the case if you start to make better decisions. And so
Yeah.
just giving yourself that space and time for yourself and to recharge and get into a good headspace, like it's just such a powerful thing of just giving yourself that to keep your head on straight.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that there's just such a strong culture of hustle and a strong culture of you need to be overworking all the time in order to succeed. And I strongly believe that that's, yeah, dangerous, and that there's a lot of power, just as you're saying here. There's a lot of power in being able to do what you need to do to work your best, which actually isn't overworking all the time.
Exactly.
I'm also hearing that there's power in having a team in which people feel comfortable expressing that to you if they're noticing that in you, and probably vice versa if you're noticing that in other people in your leadership team. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an odd thing to get to, that kind of relationship, but yeah, I've had like my team be like, how you doing there, Jake? You all right? Like, and like, and it's just like, but and then like also the flip side, like I've seen when my team gets really stressed or like they're at their wits end at stuff, and it's just kind of being conscious of each other, having some emotional intelligence with each other, and just addressing that and trying to like, I've had in times like with my team, just been like, hey, like you can take some time off, like just go take it. I swear you'll feel better. Like it'll be okay. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of our values is radical wellness for exactly this reason, is that we have a team of hardcore overachievers, and there's a very real risk to that, which is that at least one of us is probably burning out at any given time. And being able to kind of call each other on that and have that emotional intelligence that you talk about. I'll be honest, is that we thought radical wellness was going to be about encouraging ourselves to let the pendulum swing as strongly towards wellness as it does towards overwork, which is true. But what I found a lot of the power is in that dynamic that you just talked about, which is creating a level of trust with the people in your company so that they can challenge each other on radical wellness and be like, hey, like I said this to my chief of marketing just last week. She's moving next week, and also is moving from, anyway, it's a big deal, especially since she lives in India and she's moving areas. And it was just like, you know what, is 3 days really going to be enough? And just asking, you're traveling. She was originally, I think, going to take 1 day or something. It's like, just saying, you mentioned you're traveling 8 hours with a dog, like maybe you want to take a little bit extra more time. And those like nudges back and forth, I found are easy when us overachievers can't always see it for ourselves. It's that same thing you're describing. Like, what would happen? Would your projects go awry? Well, no. Huh. Interesting. You may want to consider that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome for you as a manager to recognize that and like encourage someone to take that. So that's awesome as well. Love that.
Yeah, we're all working on it. Honestly, the team calls me on it just as much as I call people on the team on it. So, all right. And just last question here. Do you have any, well, I guess second to last technically, are there any last words of wisdom that you want someone listening to really just walk away with right now?
I think the biggest thing is just that I don't think we had on with this, but just to become like a leader. I think there's a great quote of like, if you want to like become a leader, if you want to be a leader, like become someone worth following. And I think that's just a really big part of that, of this whole entire thing, is like part of all this self-development stuff is I do all of this to like level up myself, grow myself as a person. And then like my team members are excited to like join and learn from me. If I were just some like kind of butthead guy who is like really kind of, you not even say like I'm a great entrepreneur, but if I were like an entrepreneur who's not growing and just stagnating and boring and like stuff like that, like I don't think the team would be excited to work there. But because like I'm consistently trying to level myself up, my team feels like they're all growing, and it just becomes this thing I think that attracts people. So that'd be my last nugget of wisdom, is just become someone worth following.
I love that. I love that. Also, self-work can be work on the business is what I'm hearing. So that's really powerful. All right. Well, thank you, Jake. Why don't you just share with our audience, is there any place they can find more about you, your companies, check out anything you might have for them, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, the main website is just jake-jorgovan.com. That's JORGOVAN.com. And that's kind of my main site for hub for everything, where I've got the blog, the podcast there and everything. And then also leadcookie.com and contentallies.com are the two other sites for my two primary business, which is a outbound lead generation service for Lead Cookie, and then Content Allies, which is a thought leadership content agency. So that Excellent. Is what I've got going on.
Excellent. And I will just give a unsolicited pitch here, or not pitch, but endorsement, which is that if you're an agency leader, Jake's blog and podcast, I mean, both, but in particular, the blog, I think if you are looking for less of a commitment, are just two very, very, very excellent resources that approach things from a very real talk, abundance mentality, willing to show you everything behind the scenes kind of approach. And I highly, highly recommend them. And we've also worked with Lead Cookie and had great experiences with the team there as well. So yeah, and thanks, Jake, as always, for coming and sharing your wisdom so freely with me, quite frankly, but also with all of our listeners. Probably getting some value out of this too.
Awesome. And thank you for having me on here, Say. I appreciate you bringing me on the show.
Excellent. Yes, it has truly, as always, been a pleasure. And as always, to everyone who's listening, I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you're not having a great day, even if you don't have time to take like 3 hours for your personal self, I just challenge you, look at your calendar in the next week. Is there a few hours you could maybe just take for yourself or off? Just putting it out there. Anyway, regardless, I hope you have a great rest of your day and take care.